They took everything. The language, the faith, the names written on gravestones. By law, by sword, by silence. They erased the Irish from their own land. Or so they thought. Because while the empire rewrote maps and burned down monasteries, something older was already hiding, invisible to kings, untouched by law. DNA. Today, hundreds of years later, we can still see it, clustered in the west, the north, the veins of Connaught and Ulster, like the land itself never forgot who it belonged to. And here's the part that breaks logic. After centuries of conquest, genocide, famine, and forced migration, Irish genomes remain one of the most intact in Europe. Not broken, not diluted, preserved, as if the body knew what the mind was forced to forget. They beat Irish out of classrooms. They punished prayer, rewrote land deeds, replaced native laws with foreign rule. But beneath it all, the blood stayed stubborn. When the British Empire turned Ireland into its colonial laboratory, it believed it could erase a people by cutting their roots. But it never counted on memory living in marrow, resistance living in chromosomes. If you're drawn to lost histories and DNA that remembers what history tried to bury, subscribe now. Because what you're about to see isn't a history lesson. It's a recovery mission. Because this genetic survival wasn't luck. It was strategy. From famine to language bans, Ireland became the empire's test subject, a place to perfect the art of erasure. And what they learned here, they exported everywhere. Next, we open the empire's playbook. Step 1, remove land. Step 2, rewrite belief. Step 3, make a people forget who they are, unless their DNA remembers it for them. Then the question becomes, if blood could remember, how far would power go to make the body forget? Ireland didn't just suffer empire. It became the empire's classroom. This wasn't punishment. It was a prototype. Long before the British turned their sights on India or Africa, they tested their tools here. And what they'd built wasn't just colonial control. It was an entire system to erase a people from the inside out. They started with land. 8 million acres gone, seized from native families, handed to foreign lords, names stripped from deeds like bark from trees. Then came the laws. Not loud laws, quiet ones. No Catholic could vote, or hold office, or own a weapon, or speak their own language in public. The Irish weren't just conquered. They were rewritten. Children beaten for speaking Gaelic. Priests hunted for preaching in secret. A family could lose everything, just for refusing to switch faiths. And still, the empire wasn't done. They criminalized music, made inheritance illegal unless you converted, tore apart ancient customs with the precision of a scalpel. This wasn't just control. It was cultural deletion by design. But here's the twist the empire didn't plan for. The more they tried to erase, the more the Irish learned to hide, to adapt, to pass memory like a sacred ember, hand to hand. Every tune hummed in secret, every story told in a whisper, every grandmother teaching Gaelic by candlelight. That was resistance. And somewhere inside that silence, a new rebellion was forming. Not on the battlefield, not in parliament, but in kitchens, songs, and shadows. Because even as the empire broke their backs, the Irish were building something silently unbreakable. It wouldn't stay quiet forever, because silence has a breaking point. And in Ireland, it broke between 1845 and 1852. They called it famine. But this wasn't just crop failure. It was engineered collapse. While children starved in mud huts, ships left Irish harbors full of grain, butter, meat, bound for English markets. 1 million dead, another million gone. But here's the darker twist. Those who left didn't just carry hunger. They carried memory, encoded grief, the kind of pain that plants itself in the blood. In the western counties where Irish was strongest, where the culture was oldest, the silence came fast. Villages emptied, languages buried with the dead. And yet, the boats didn't sing the story. They scattered it. To Boston, to Melbourne, to Buenos Aires. Every name changed at Ellis Island. Every accent lost. Every holy word mistranslated. Wasn't the end of Irishness. It was its mutation. Because even thousands of miles away, the hunger kept speaking. in rebellion songs, in church basements, in fire-eyed speeches from men who remembered stories their mothers never told them. But somehow they knew. This wasn't just migration. It was diaspora by design. And what the empire didn't realize is that trauma travels. It crosses oceans, raises children, becomes politics. Generations later, that same pain would light fires, organize unions, shape revolutions, because identity doesn't always survive through pride. Sometimes it survives through loss, and loss leaves a mark, not just in stories, but in the genome. What if trauma, real, historic, collective trauma, actually shaped Irish DNA? What if memory isn't just cultural, but cellular? Because something did survive the ships, something older than empire, something buried deep, but not dead, not gone. It flickered, in corners of silence, in places the empire forgot to look. It flickered, because when a people lose their land, their names, their voice, they don't disappear. They whisper. Ireland's next rebellion didn't come with rifles. It came with chalk and candlelight, hedge schools, the legal, hidden, sacred, a blanket on wet ground, a child reading Latin behind a stone wall, a priest whispering math beneath a sky that never told. They taught what was banned. They spoke what was criminal, not just to educate, to remember. And when language became a weapon, every sentence in Irish was an act of defiance. Somewhere, a boy is beaten in class for speaking Gaelic. His teacher rips the word from his mouth like it's poison. Decades later, his great-grandson stands on a global stage, mic in hand, rapping in Gaelic, and the beat doesn't just echo through speakers. It echoes through blood, because culture, too, has memory, passed like a secret recipe, like fire in the bones. Stories, songs, prayers, encrypted messages wrapped in lullabies and wedding chants, not stored in books, stored in people. That's cultural DNA, a parallel code, one that mutates with every generation, but never forgets the original pattern. You can outlaw it, you can punish it, but if one grandmother keeps telling the story, it survives. And in Ireland, thousands of grandmothers did. Whispers in the dark, lessons in the rain, a lullaby so soft, the empire never heard it, until it was too late. Because one day, the whispers stopped being secrets, and became a movement. A movement was rising, not with guns, not yet, but with something sharper. Language. After centuries underground, the whispers were becoming thunder. Because for the first time in generations, Irish identity wasn't just surviving in silence. It was stepping into the light. This was not nostalgia. This was war. A cultural counterattack. In 1892, a man stood before a crowded hall in Dublin. Douglas Hyde, suit pressed, voice steady, and dropped a single sentence that would ripple through history. We must de-Anglicize Ireland. It wasn't a slogan. It was a threat, and it landed like one. He wasn't asking for respect. He was demanding reversal, not just from Britain, but from the Irish themselves. Erase the erasure. Undo the forgetting. Fight with your tongue, your games, your songs. And suddenly, what was once illegal, beaten out of children, burned from books, was everywhere. Gaelic became more than a language. It became a weapon. The Gaelic League exploded. 10 branches, then 50, then 400. Irish sports, Irish books, Irish pride. Not preserved, but revived. The same dances once punished in secret were now performed on stages. The words that once got boys whipped were printed in schoolbooks. This wasn't preservation. It was insurgency. And it worked. Because culture, real, rooted culture, doesn't ask permission. It rises. It dares. And it lays the emotional groundwork for revolution. By the time the Easter Rising came in 1916, the bullets were already years late. The fire had started in language, in stories, in the soul. But just as Ireland reclaimed its voice, another layer of identity began to hum beneath the surface. Something silent, something scientific. Because while the culture was rising, the bloodlines were already telling a deeper story. Long before the slogans, before the uprisings, before the British Empire even set foot on the island, Ireland had already written its truth. Not in books. In biology. Because when researchers cracked open the Irish genome, they didn't just find ancestry. They found memory. The Irish DNA Atlas revealed 23 distinct genetic clusters. Not random. Not scattered. They matched almost perfectly to the 4 ancient provinces: Ulster, Munster, Connaught, Leinster. Like the land and the blood had made a secret pact, never to forget each other. And here's the contradiction no one saw coming. After centuries of invasion, Vikings, Normans, English lords, the Irish genome barely changed. Minimal mixing, minimal dilution, as if something resisted, not with weapons, but with continuity. And then the real shock. DNA samples taken from Bronze Age graves, 3,000 years old, matched modern Irish people living today. Not metaphor, not folklore, science. A woman in Galway traces her family line not through paper, but through cells. Her genetic code reaches across millennia, a living map of survival. And the echoes run deepest in the very counties hit hardest by famine, the most isolated, the most scarred. It's like the trauma sealed the memory in tighter, made the genome even louder. Empires may redraw maps, but DNA does not. And now a new tension rises, because Irishness is no longer just in flags or accents or place names. It's in cheekbones, blood types, enzymes. But here's the question no test can answer. Who gets to claim it? The ones with the blood, or the ones with the story? Who gets to claim Irishness? The ones with the blood, or the ones with the story? But what if it's both? What if the story is still unfolding, in people who've never even set foot on Irish soil? Because while the genome slept in the homeland, the blood was whispering across oceans. In New York, in Sydney, in Cape Town and Buenos Aires, something was stirring. Not folklore, longing. They left because they had to. Famine, rebellion, survival. But their children, and their children's children, grew up with names they couldn't pronounce, songs they couldn't translate, but a feeling they couldn't shake. Irish. Today, 80 million people claim that word. 10 times the population of the island itself. 10 times the memory. And now they're coming back. Not just in flights and ferry rides, but in apps, blood tests, digital reunions. Duolingo sees a surge in Irish learners. Not from Dublin, but from Detroit, from Seoul, from Sao Paulo. Gaelic football clubs rise in the Bronx. Genealogy kits connect long-lost cousins between Cork and California. And sometimes, it's uncanny. A bartender in Chicago spits into a tube. Weeks later, his Y chromosome lights up, linked to a famine-era farm in County Clare, a place he's never been, but suddenly can't stop dreaming about. Irishness isn't just something you're born into now. It's something you reclaim. You rebuild. You choose. It lives in tattoos inked on skin that's never seen rain from the Irish Sea, in playlists filled with trad music and trap beats, blended in Gaels. It's pride. It's grief. It's a ghost calling you home. But here's where the ground shifts again. Because that DNA so many are chasing, it might not be Celtic at all. And what comes next shatters everything we thought we knew about where Irishness began. Because for centuries, we were told the same story. That the Irish came from the Celts, fierce, warlike tribes from Central Europe. Hallstatt, Latin, the so-called fathers of Gaelic identity. But the genome says otherwise. When scientists traced the deepest layers of Irish DNA, they didn't find roots in the Alps. They found them on the Atlantic, Iberia, Brittany, the coasts of what's now Spain and France. Not Celtic invaders, seafarers, farmers, ancient hunters who crossed waters long before written memory. And the bones we've dug from Irish soil, from Neolithic tombs, Bronze Age barrows, they speak too. Layer after layer, a mosaic appears. Hunter-gatherers, then farmers, then metalworkers who brought new genes and new tools, but never erased what came before. Irishness, it turns out, was never a single arrival. It was a layering, a palimpsest, a story rewritten 1,000 times, and never fully erased. Which means this: there's no pure Irish DNA, no one origin, no chosen blood, And maybe that's the point, because every empire that tried to define Irishness, tried to own it, used that idea of purity. One people, one blood, one history. But the truth is messier, more beautiful. Irish identity isn't about a single lineage. It's a survival code, a lived resistance, not carved in stone, but breathed into being again and again. So maybe the question isn't where did we come from? Maybe it's something deeper. Because if identity isn't in the blood alone, where does it truly live? Not just in blood, in memory, in choice. Because identity isn't something you inherit. It's something you keep choosing, especially when everything tells you to forget. And right now, across Ireland, that choice is louder than ever. Irish language schools, once nearly extinct, are full again, from 11 to hundreds in just one generation. Children dreaming in the very language their great-grandparents were punished for speaking. In Belfast, 3 young men step on stage. Their sound, raw, furious, magnetic. It's hip-hop. In Gaelge, they call themselves Kneecap. Their lyrics burn with history. But they don't preach. They hit. They hit like memory waking up inside a modern beat. This is revival, but not for nostalgia. For defiance. The same games once banned by British law, hurling, Gaelic football, are now played on every continent. GAA clubs in Dubai, Toronto, Tokyo. Global tribes of muscle, sweat, and story. And the stories themselves? The ones nearly lost in famine and silence? They were saved. Locked in tape reels. Written by candlelight. The Irish Folklore Commission spent decades chasing down elders, farmers, fishermen, recording what the empire never wanted written down. Those archives now hold UNESCO status. World Heritage. Once outlawed, now immortal. But the most powerful twist isn't in the past. It's in the present. Because today, the newest generation isn't just inheriting Irishness. They're inventing it, claiming it, shaping it. Not because they must, but because they can. They speak Irish because their grandparents couldn't. They sing old songs with new rhythms. They wear old words like new armor. And suddenly, identity doesn't feel like something behind us. It feels alive. Because Irishness isn't owned. It's remembered. And yet, one final mystery remains. How did Ireland's oldest code survive in full view? Because it was never just in the books. Never just in the bones. It was in rhythm, in ritual, in resistance. For hundreds of years, they tried to kill it. The laws, the famine, the flag that flew over everything that once had a name in Irish. They erased the records, banned the music, anglicized the place names, then the people. But they never understood what they were fighting. Because Irishness, real Irishness, wasn't built to be seen. It was built to be felt. In the way a grandmother wraps prayer around a bedtime story. In how a fiddle echoes a cry you don't remember, but somehow know. In the ache of leaving and the pulse of returning. Modern science finally caught up. Sequencers, genome maps, cold machines confirmed what every Irish heart already knew. Something ancient never left. DNA doesn't forget, even when memory does. And when you zoom out far enough, you see it wasn't the genes alone. It was the code of survival, of culture learned sideways, through song, through silence, of language smuggled across centuries in lullabies and rebellions. This wasn't pride. It was programming. Because you can exile the body, ban the song, silence the tongue, but you can't kill the code. And now, as science cracks open secrets, once lost to time, a deeper truth is rising. Not every ancestor wore Celtic braids. Not every root begins where you thought. If identity is both memory and mutation, then maybe the real question is, what forgotten legacy lives in you? Next time, what if the Celts weren't the beginning, but the middle of Ireland's deeper origin story?